We have a special guest speaker with us today, and I'm not going to read the bio. I'm going to tell a story. When we first met, we were in some trying times in the city. Crime was spiking. We were on record pace for murders. And that which is celebrated today as a national model, with what we do day in and day out with our law enforcement partners, of what's titled the C4 Huddle. Paul is a Princeton grad and a Harvard grad as well. That which you have been able to help us do here in Camden and help us do as an organization to take a fledgling brand new organization and help it to be created into a model in which, look, you were in large part the reason why the President of the United States came here and visited us in 2015 and held up the work of the men and women in this room as it being that of a model. You were one of our chief advocates down in Washington, D.C. You were the one that ensured that a lot of credit that probably should have been going elsewhere was coming to us. So I thank you for that, and I'd like to take this opportunity to bring you forward and let you speak to the men and women that are here today for a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
I wanted them to see what this police department is like, and the kinds of things that this police department does, the kinds of people this department has promoted, the kind of people this department has hired. And for me, a lot of it is in this slideshow that I watched for the last 5 or 10 minutes as it sort of paraded over my right shoulder and over my left shoulder. Because what's remarkable about that slideshow is I don't think there's a defendant in a single photograph. I don't think there's a handcuff in a single photograph, and there's not a photograph that I saw in which I could see the weapon holstered or unholstered of one of your force. And that's because what matters to the chief and what matters to you all is not that. That's important. That's a lot of reasons why we have cops, is to arrest bad people, to pull your weapons when you need to, and I'll talk about that in a minute, to use your handcuffs when you have to. But that work, those relationships, those photographs are why the community really needs you and why your work really matters all the time. My son told me a joke a couple years ago. He's now 13. At the time he told me this joke, he was probably 9 or 10. I was he was 20 at the time. And it was something that was a joke, or he thought it was a joke. He said, "Dad, how can you tell when a lawyer's lying? His lips move." Now, I pretended I'd never heard that joke before. I smiled gamely, and I told him how hilarious I think he is. It's not, of course, a very funny joke. Although, admit it, a few of you giggled a little bit, those of you who hate lawyers in particular. And I want to ask you all just to stop for a minute and think that what is it that makes jokes like that resonate? Why does it strike a chord? Why? It's because somehow we, you, me, all of us, some of us, have an image or a thought or a belief or a prejudice that somehow lawyers can't be trusted to tell the truth. It's a stereotype, but it's one that may well come from an occasion or a handful of occasions when an unscrupulous lawyer or a few or several unscrupulous lawyers behaved in a way that made people sit up and take notes. All lawyers? Not by a long shot, but maybe a handful of bad rogue lawyers who made bad ethical decisions that tainted the pool. And guess what? And you know this. That is not a phenomenon that's limited to the way people think about lawyers. This is a hard time to be a cop. It was never easy if you're the kind of officer who cares. But I think, based on what I've seen over the last 8 years, it's even harder now than when I started as a prosecutor in 1983. Every one of you, and there are about 700,000, Scott will know the answer for sure, about 700,000 sworn officers all across the country. Every one of you is now viewed in some way as responsible for what every other cop does everywhere else. When one police officer halfway across the United States makes a mistake, or worse, abuses the power of the badge, you all answer for it in one way or another. To a certain extent, you're like the lawyer who was branded a liar because of somebody else's sins. And you know what makes that even harder? By and large, nobody's taking out a cell phone and taking a video and posting it on YouTube when a lawyer says something that's not exactly true, or when a used car salesman says something that's not exactly true, something that doesn't square with the facts.
As you all know, this is Police Week, and it's the time in which we honor those that have paid the ultimate price, sacrificing their lives for the greater good of others. I'd like to take a second and just read the names of these officers, particularly from our brethren agencies as well, that have died in the line of duty. From the Camden County Sheriff's Office in 1916, so actually 100 years ago. This summer will be 101 years. Turnkey Isaac Hibbs. From the Camden County Prosecutor's Office, Investigator John, also known as Jack McLaughlin. Many of you in this room remember that incident. It was a little more than 20 years ago. We have a list of 9 Camden police officers. I will read their names, and I'll play a brief video following the reading. The first officer killed in the line of duty, William Feitz, 1934. Officer Leon Plizikowski, 1939. Officer George Jeffress, 1951. Sergeant Carmen Fossarello, 1961. Police Officer Charles Sutman, 1969. Police Officer George Solch, Jr., 1969. Police Officer Rand Chandler, 1969. Police Officer Elwood Ridge, 1973. And Police Officer Stuart L. Roberts, 1975.
I just want to make a couple of observations. We'll be real quick about the film that we just saw, which was so incredibly tender and moving. I'm amazed at how many of them had wives who were pregnant at the time of their passing. Did you not notice that? And almost all of them young men, and had young families, had young children in their homes. It caused me to wonder what became of their wives, their children, their families, what happened to them in their lives. Surely it could not have been easy for them to live a life without their father, their husband, a son, grandson. But I do know this. I do know. Officer David Stinsman, please come forward. On the morning of January 11, 2017, Officer David Stinsman responded to a call about a domestic violence incident at an apartment on the 2700 block of Federal Street involving a male suspect who was armed with a gun and threatening the life of a female victim. After arriving on the scene and entering the residence, Officer Stinsman briefly observed the suspect at the top of their stairwell. As he reached the top of the stairs and looked into the apartment, Officer Stinsman saw the suspect fire a handgun at the female victim who was holding their infant child. Recognizing that he had to act immediately to save the lives of a mother and a baby, Officer Stinsman did not hesitate and fired his weapon at the suspect to neutralize him before he could fire any additional rounds at the woman and their infant child. After the suspect fell, Officer Stinsman immediately made sure that he was disarmed and that the baby was safe. He then began to render aid to both the victim, who had been shot in the throat, and to the suspect. Officer Stinsman displayed tremendous courage in making a split-second decision that saved the life of a mother and a child who could have been killed had he not acted. He is deserving of this award for bravery.
Before I call Elder Jensen forward for our benediction, just like to say a few words with regards to that which we've honored here today. One of the things that I am so very proud of, that which this organization has embraced, is not the training of de-escalation, but the culture of it. The culture is a shared set of values and beliefs. We recognize the fact that you all in this room have embraced the sanctity of human life and its significance. That you resolve situations utilizing your service pistol and your handcuffs as absolute tools of absolute last resort. You see, the sanctity of human life at times may call for you to take a life, as we heard with Officer Stinsman here today. It was the sanctity of the life of the toddler, the infant, and the woman that was holding that infant that he acted upon and neutralized the suspect. What was absolutely remarkable, particularly of what occurred that day and what has occurred on prior incidents, is that the moment that that suspect was no longer a threat, his life had value. It's not an easy thing to do, guys and gals. In fact, many would say it's beyond human. But to be engaged in an armed confrontation, render it safe, and then proceed to save the life of a person that just maybe tried taking your life or someone else's, is absolutely remarkable. I know we have a vast array of different types of faiths and beliefs that are in this room. And I'm a man of faith. I believe that that which we do day in and day out serves a greater good. I believe it's a vocation. And I believe those of you in this room, those of us in this organization, that see it as such, get the true rewards that this job has to offer. It's the reason why when we created this organization, we had that rare opportunity, that very rare opportunity to start something from scratch. We had the creed of our organization being service before self. We emblazoned it, sits on the badge on your chest. It's also in your oath of office. I'm in awe of what you do day in and day out. And I can't say enough of the environment in which you do it in, the scrutiny which you do it under. It's unlike any one of us before I've ever had to do. And we have an amazing command staff. The deputies, the captains, the lieutenants, the sergeants, and they truly care about you. They do. And I'm sure there's not one of them that disagree with me that what you are doing day in and day out is far harder, far more difficult, and far more challenging than when we were in your situation. One of the forefathers of that which we're doing is the sheriff, Whip Wilson. One of the first guys to really bring the mentality and the model of community policing to the Camden Police Department 20-some odd years ago. And we're going to continue to do that. You know why? Because it's working. And at the end of the day, I am not going to judge your performance by the number of tickets you write or the number of people you arrest. It's going to be how many children are riding their bicycles in front of their homes in the neighborhoods which you're patrolling, and how many people are sitting on their front steps. See, the things that count most can't always be counted. And I hear it from the people out in the community. So I thank you from the very bottom of my heart. And the promise that you all can take away from this from me is I will always, in every way, shape, or form, try to do the very best I can to the deputies, to the captains, to the lieutenants, to the sergeants, to ensure that you guys are as safe as humanly possible in doing the remarkable job that you do.